Where is God in the midst of this pandemic? Where is God in all our fear and terror, sickness and suffering, devastation and death? Where is God in the midst of this epic disruption of our world, our economy, our city, our communities, our church, our families, our social activities, and our daily lives? In the space of just a few months, the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic has shaken the core of humanity. Our certainty, our structures, our institutions, our future, at times even our hope and faith in God have been shaken and stripped bare. This global pandemic has led many of us to ask the question, where is God? Not surprisingly, 2 books have already been hastily written in response to this question. One by an Oxford mathematician named John Lennox, who moonlights as a Christian apologist. The other by a postmodern philosopher, Slavoj Žižek. Both attempt to provide an answer to the question of God in the pandemic. Lennox touts the old theological idea of God's permissive will. God did not cause the crisis, but God gave human beings free will and permits our capacity for evil. The virus, of course, then is the result of our poor choices. Lennox seeks to take God off the hook for the pandemic and goes so far as to suggest COVID-19 might be a blessing in disguise. Viruses are beneficial, he claims. Unsung heroes that recycle nutrients and regulate what species eat and keep ecosystems functioning smoothly. Therefore, the human suffering and agony caused by the virus is simply an opportunity for Christian character formation. Where is God? For Lennox, God is sitting back, waiting to see who will keep the faith and receive the reward of a crown of righteousness when Christ returns in glory. Slavoj Žižek offers a much darker view. His answer to the question, where is God, is gone, absent, not here, departed. According to Žižek, God has left us to our own devices and abandoned us in the midst of this pandemic, just as Christ was forsaken on the cross. And so here we have these choices. Either God is testing us, or God has abandoned us, and neither are very satisfying answers to those who are suffering. Lennox and Žižek's answer to the question of God's location in the midst of the pandemic are reminiscent of the way people responded to the Black Plague, which decimated the world's population and killed approximately half of the people in Europe. The predominant Christian belief at the time was that God caused the plague to punish people for their sins, and there was nothing anyone could do but turn to God and pray for relief. And yet, for the people who were suffering, it seemed as if God never heard their prayers, never came to their aid. The 14th century English cleric William Langland, who lived through the Black Plague, penned this epic poem called Piers Plowman. He penned it during the pandemic, and he wrote, God is deaf nowadays and will not hear us. And our guilt, he grinds good people into dust. Christians believe that God brought the pandemic to punish humanity for their iniquities, and so they responded to the plague in some of the same ways Christians in America are responding today. Wealthy Christians fled from areas of infection to their villas in the countryside for their own protection. Opportunists propagated conspiracy theories and sold potions as false cures for the disease. Religious leaders demanded people come out of their homes and attend worship, participate in penitential processions to appease God's wrath, and adopt highly disciplined practices of fasting and prayer. Many blamed and scapegoated marginalized communities to the virus and violently persecuted the Jewish people just as we have with Asian Americans and immigrants. In fact, a horrifying practice called flagellation emerged during the Black Plague. The flagellants were a movement of Christian extremists who roamed around Europe town to town in 40-day campaigns wearing white robes and hoods foreshadowing the KKK. They would whip themselves for their sins and for the sins of humanity publicly, falling to the ground in a penitential frenzy, and then leading villages in the persecution of Jews and gypsies and other minority groups to purge society of their sins. Yet the disheartening outcome of all these desperate attempts to appease God's judgment was simply more tragedy and suffering and death. Their efforts were futile. Nothing worked. The plague continued to ravage every aspect of European society without discrimination. Those who survived were distraught and stricken with grief, numb and almost without feeling. Many succumbed to despair. As the plague raged on, the seeming impotence and ineffectuality of Christian responses caused many to challenge the existence of God, re-examine their theological beliefs, to question the authority of the church, and to seek a different kind of Christianity. People were forced to reimagine God, religion, the church, and society itself, and this spirit would lead to the Protestant Reformation, a radical shift in the philosophical paradigm of the age, and give birth to what we now call the Renaissance. When tragedy struck, old paradigms failed, medieval theology was completely inadequate, and the powerful question, where is God in the Black Plague, led to a reconceptualization of who God is and what it means to be in relationship with God. Many look back to the desert monastics, the church fathers and mothers of the past, or to the letters of Paul or the life of Jesus to remember their way into a new vision of God. As the people of God living today in the midst of our own pandemic, now we must admit, our conception of God has not been adequate for this crisis. Like the medieval Christians, we too have struggled to understand God in this pandemic. Both those on the right and the left have blamed God for the virus, if not as a form of punishment, then at least as a revelation of the sins of those to whom we despise. Like the medieval Christians, all our attempts to appease the God we imagine for ourselves have not been effective, because our understanding of God was misguided. Like the medieval Christians, this crisis forces us to look into the past to rediscover a new and more accurate and healthy picture of God, a life-giving picture of who God is and what God means to us. Paul's extraordinary sermon to the Greek philosophers at the Areopagus in Athens, Greece, is the quintessential biblical statement on the identity and character of God. Paul stood at the altar to the unknown God, a Greco-Roman way of describing the God of Israel, and proclaimed that God is not angry with us and does not need to be appeased. God is not waiting to judge us or trying to punish us. God is not a God of death, but a God of life. Not the giver of death, but the giver of life. Oh, how we have deeply misunderstood this God that Paul proclaimed. How did we miss this extraordinary picture of God as creator of heaven and earth, who does not live in shrines made by human hands, nor is served by human hands, and needs nothing, but gives life to all mortals and breath to all things, who made all nations from one ancestor, allotted times and boundaries of their existence so that they would search for God, perhaps grope for God and find God. Though the truth is, Paul says, God is not far from each of us. For in God we live and move and have our being. For we too are God's offspring, God's children. Yes, God is a deity, but not like those made of gold or silver or stone, because God cannot be formed by the art or imagination of mortals. The functional way of explaining the universe in Greco-Roman times was through a pantheon of gods and goddesses who ruled various regions of the world, various aspects of human existence. A god of this land or that, a god of the sun, the sea, the sky, and the underworld, the weather and the harvest, a god of love, a god of war, a god of health and economics, a god of the harvest and fertility of marriage. All the gods required tribute to keep them happy. All the calamities that beset the earth were the result of the disappointment and frustration of the gods. And so Paul came to Athens and was not too impressed by their highly devoted religious culture. He was irritated by their idolatry. Yet he did not castigate the Athenians for their misunderstanding of God. Instead, Paul tried to win them over and woo them into the arms of the God of Israel. He did so by adopting and appropriating the language of their own philosophers, Yet the reason Paul's vision of God was so compelling was not its similarity to the pantheon and philosophies of the age, but its radical difference, its radical subversion of the idea of divinity itself. The unknown God who Paul described as creator and life-giver was not angry or at war with humanity, but in love with humanity, infatuated with all creatures of the earth and with life itself. Paul's vision of God was not new. It was in line with the picture of divinity that overwhelms the biblical narrative. The stunning portrait there is of God as an unrequited lover of all humanity, an unrequited lover of creation and all its creatures. As John said, God is love, and that's the picture that we see over and over again. A God so filled with love it overflowed in creation of a world filled with goodness and beauty. A God described by the psalmists and prophets as a lover who's constantly searching for and longing for the love of a lost and unfaithful partner. A God who Jesus described as a bridegroom searching and longing for their bride. A God who Abraham, Joshua, Heschel described as a God in search of humanity. The God Paul described in Athens is a God who not only created us, but a God who loves us and is looking for us and longing for us and desires nothing more than for us to search for her and long for her in return. And yet we are promised the greatest truth of all truths is that she is never far from us, for in her we live and move and have our being. We are alive and we are in love, because we are in God who is love and life itself. We are made in God's image, the image of love and life, and not the other way around. We are made in the image of God, which means we cannot make God in our own image. Oh, we try to many times in many different ways. That's what an idol is, actually. An idol is a God who we make in our own image through our own mortal imagination with our human hands. Paul was clear the Creator cannot be created by the art and imagination of humans. God cannot be fashioned in gold or silver produced by human hands or mortal minds. Contrary to what we've often heard, idols are not the symbols of another holy religion or sacred tradition. No, to worship an idol is to worship something we have created. As scholar Willie Jennings states, the idol is a collective self-deception, a selfish delusion, a point of facilitation where human fantasy and wish circulating around material realities generates a distorted hope. The idol facilitates a hope of control, a control of both my life and the life of the gods. That is, to draw the gods into a common cause with me for sustaining my flourishing. To create and to worship and to sustain a fabricated idea of ourselves or the collective self. The example Paul provides of idols or shrines and altars, temples, or sanctuaries made by human hands, art like brick architecture, gold crosses, or stained glass windows. Our adoration of these material things reveals that there has been in our lives a migration of the holy, away from God onto what we've made for ourselves. But we also have far more dangerous forms of collective self-deception. Human constructed ideologies that we have infused with sacred and divine significance to our own demise. The idol of the invisible hand of the free market. The idol of capitalism and the idol of money. The idol of white supremacy. The idol of nationalism. The idol of American exceptionalism. The idol of Christian superiority. If this pandemic has done anything, it has revealed and exposed our most cherished idols for what they truly are. False and impotent gods. We may pray to them, pay tribute to them, vote for them as if they are angry gods who need to be appeased, but they are not sacred or divine. They are simply oppressive systems we have created for ourselves. They are not religious. They are cults of death. And like the gods of the pantheon, the God of Greek metaphysics, the God of medieval Christianity, the gods that we have created for ourselves are dead and lifeless and cannot save us. The choice as a people of faith we have, has been, and always will be the choice to worship a stillborn idol or a living God, to participate in a cult of death or a community of life, to follow a dead man or a love that never dies. The question is not where is God in the coronavirus world. It's not the location of the divine we are concerned about, but the identity of God. The real question is, who is God in the coronavirus world? When all our idols have been exposed, when our delusions have been revealed, when all our ideologies of injustice have been brought into the light of day, when our lives have been stripped bare of every self-deception, then who is God? Who is God now? Some will experience this revelation as a rude awakening, because it will become clear, sadly, that the God they worshipped was not a God of love and life, but something beautifully fashioned by human hands or constructed by our mortal imagination. The practice of communion with bread and wine, gathering together physically, making music or singing together, sitting in the sanctuary, gazing upon a stained glass window. Grief overwhelms us as we have been forced to let those beautiful idols go and begin our search for the unknown God. The good news is that this is exactly what we were made for, what God created us for, what we were designed for. We were made to search for God, to inhabit the earth for an allotted time, and then to look for God, to be God's lost lovers and prodigal children, to journey in the dark and then find God. Yet no matter how lost we feel or how far away we think we are from God, the truth is that God is never far from us. God is closer to us than our own breath, and comes to us disguised as our own lives. In this time of pandemic, we worship from home and refuse to participate in any culture or cult of death, because we know that God is with us wherever we are. We do not need a sanctuary because God does not live in shrines made by human hands. Even if we cannot be together physically, we still march on in our journey of faith as a community of life, because we are united by love and by the power of the Holy Spirit. God is not made of gold or silver or brick or stone or formed by the art and imagination of mortals. And thank God that our God is not an idol of our own making. No, instead, our God is the creator of life, and the God of love, in whom we live and move and have our being, and nothing can separate us from love, because, as Paul reminded us, we are God's offspring, God's beloved children, made in the image and likeness of love. So let us remember this God today in this pandemic. May this old picture of God become our new vision and our true theology, because the truth of this God is that no matter where we are right now, love is not far from us. No matter what we are going through, love is not far from us. No matter what this pandemic has done to our lives, love is not far from us. No matter whether we are alone or with dozens of family, love is not far from us. No matter how lonely or sad or grieving, hurting or hopeless we may be, love is not far from us. No matter how much suffering or death looms over our world, love is not far from us. It is as close as our breath. Where is God in this crisis? Better to ask, who is God? God is love, and God is with us, and we are always in love, because we are always in God. And all God's people said,